Hello and welcome to Shifting Dimensions, a program dedicated to the exploration of consciousness in dialogue form within the matrix of the shifting time we live in. And we're pleased to have on Shifting Dimensions 14, Simeon Hein on again. We had him on about a month ago, and we were talking about crop circles and remote viewing. And we refer the viewer to our website, shiftingdimensions.com. We encourage people to go there and get filled in on all the information we talked about last time on crop circles and remote viewing and their interconnections. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and then we're going to segue into disclosure and talk about what people know about this phenomenon in general. So without further ado, I'd like to reintroduce Simeon Hein. Simeon, it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me back again.
You're welcome. You know, last time we really got into it about crop circles and about remote viewing, and so you wanted to touch more upon that, maybe say a few more words on that, and then we'll segue in and see how it relates to UFOs and to everything else.
Well, you know, the thing is, a lot of the topics we talked about last time, remote viewing, crop circles, you know, these are things that I had never learned about in graduate school. You know, when you go through a long education process like many of us have, you get through, you think you know how the world and the universe works. And the biggest shock to me was to find out that there were these phenomena out there that I had really never been properly introduced to. I'm not saying I expected to learn about these things in depth necessarily in college or graduate school, but at least someone could have mentioned some of these topics. You know, remote viewing, for example, I mean, it was a government program for 20 years, so taxpayers paid for it. I never heard the term used before. And then I hear this term remote viewing, I'm kind of skeptical. I take this class in it, and I find out it's real. You know, the whole thing about this, Joe, it's kind of like a series of links, you know, in a long chain of a rope. And one topic introduces you to another, introduces you to another.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. Pretty soon you're just finding about all sorts of things that you never would have taken seriously before. And that's really how I kind of got involved in looking at all these kind of topics that people may call paranormal. I just think of them as just, you know, science that we're just learning about now. New science always seems kind of strange when you learn about it.
What other phenomena would you say is related to the crop circles and remote viewing? What other, you know, in this web of
Definitely superconductivity. You know, there's a lot of research being done right now in high temperature superconductivity where you can get, you know, electrons flowing through a metal or other type of substance with a lot less resistance at kind of room temperature. You know, you can get this going on at very cold temperatures near absolute zero. These experiments are actually done over at NIST, right over in Boulder, where some of these things were discovered. But now we're finding that there are certain substances where you can get this very low resistance to this electron flow in room, kind of closer to room temperature materials. The whole point is when you kind of get this process going, this kind of Cooper pairing between electrons where they kind of pair up and become buddies, and they kind of like they're skating on ice, you know. All sorts of other properties begin to manifest. And one of these properties is quantum tunneling, where some of the electrons jump out of the surface where they're in across the room or somewhere else. And Brian Josephson, who is a Nobel-winning physicist from England, actually thinks that this could be responsible for some of the effects we see in psi phenomena, including remote viewing, telepathy, psychokinesis. In other words, it may be that a lot of these phenomena that we've been talking about actually have a very, you know, grounded scientific basis. It's just science that we don't completely understand yet. So we actually could be seeing kind of the tip of the iceberg of new types of phenomena that we're just discovering now, and they may have their basis in quantum mechanics and superconductivity. By the way, Brian Josephson was kind of shunned by the physics community after he started talking about anything outside of, you know, of conventional physics. They even made a stamp out of him in England, and there were complaints to the Postal Service in England because people thought, you know, it's too strange. But he's just basically logically going from one thing to the next and saying, you know, this could explain what we see in a lot of these phenomena, which we know statistically are real.
It seems like we have to transcend the mind body, you know, that the interface between the so-called mind or mental phenomena and physical phenomena. It seems like that barrier has to be, by science, has to be broken through. That there has to be. It seems like as long as you stay in the material level, you're basically dealing with effects rather than cause. And I know it's harder to measure internal phenomena, but it seems like when that barrier is reached, maybe it has been to some extent, observer and observed being seen as part of the same phenomenon. in modern physics. What would you say is what would have to happen for science to start taking some psychic functions seriously?
That's a really good question, Joe. The thing about it is there was an agreement made, I don't know if you know this, between the Catholic Church and the scientific community back in the Middle Ages, that science would get the body and that the church would get the spirit. Mm-hmm. And so this is partly why we have this division between mind and body, is because there was an agreement made between the institutions at the time, a power-sharing agreement.
Right.
Some of us get your body and some of us get your mind.
That's not my territory,
Yeah, but it's fascinating how it's a kind of a product of a power struggle. And so where we are now is we still kind of are very suspect of things that we can't easily measure. And this is not entirely the fault of scientists. A lot of the things that you and I are talking about in terms of these subtle energy processes and, some of the organizations, ICEM and others that study these things, these are not easy to measure. You have to set up very carefully controlled experiments and use Faraday cages and things to get a measurement of these subtle energy processes, and then do it in a very controlled way to show statistically that something's going on. Mm-hmm. So it's partly a measurement issue. I mean, science doesn't really like to deal with anything that you can't get direct measurements of.
Right.
But we can see the end product of some of these phenomena. Perhaps it's these balls of light that we look at in crop circles, or definitely some of these sort of telepathic or empathic effects you can see when people do remote viewing, where statistically they're getting a lot more accuracy than they should be getting if they, were just guessing. And it's showing you, inductively, that there's another channel of communication going on below the surface. You can't see how it's happening, but it's there. And what we really have to wonder is what else is there in this channel of communication, because we do have all these other phenomena that conventional science would like to marginalize, and yet we have increasing evidence that these are real. And they won't go away because they are real. And so we really should be expanding our scientific parameters to incorporate these phenomena instead of being so afraid of them, pushing them away. Because really, look, we're in a situation right now on the planet where we appear to have several crises going on at once, in terms of environmental, economic. These are all connected. And part of the reason is we are pushing away scientific discoveries and possibilities, opportunities for discovery and for expanding ourselves.
Pushing away.
Yeah.
In what way are we pushing away these opportunities?
We want to deal with the world like it's a material substance, even though we know from quantum mechanics that ultimately that we're almost hypnotized by material things. The basis of everything is energy.
Mm-hmm. Now, who are we in this regard?
I would say the Western civilization,
our
mindset.
Or the
No, all of us. We all have this mindset to some degree. All of us raised in Western civilization that there are these things, and then those are real, and then there are ideas and thoughts which you can't see, so they're not as real as things. We know that if you look, we magnify any object in this room, including us, to a large degree, what we'll find is basically a vacuum of empty space with these little particles blinking on and off. Right. Proportionally, subatomic particles are like as far apart as like two apples at the different ends of a football stadium, and most of
space in between.
It's mostly empty space, and yet when we look at it, it seems so real. And the whole point is we've been kind of hypnotized by this sort of materialism to believe that there's something solid here. The net result is we kind of push away other phenomena that don't fit easily into this materialistic notion. And, the mechanistic paradigm, the Cartesian mechanistic paradigm, where we treat matter as more real than energy.